Cult Cinema Podcast.
Come to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
All right, welcome everybody back to another great episode of the Cult Cinema Podcast. I'm Gage.
I'm Ashley.
And today we are talking about John McTiernan.
Sure.
His 1988 film, Die Hard.
Die Hard.
I don't know if you could really call it a cult classic. I guess you kind of can.
I'm taking it from the perspective of the argument that it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
That's why.
Which, do we want to get into that now, or do we want to wait until later to get into that?
We can get into it now. It's fine.
Okay.
Since we're doing it for a Christmas episode.
Right. Okay, so a big debate around this film, the biggest controversy around it is whether or not it is a Christmas movie. I think both of you are of the opinion that it is.
It is.
Hardcore.
Yeah.
And so I watched a video from the Film Institute or American Film Institute where John McTiernan talks about this. And he states that they did not intend it to be a Christmas movie, but the joy that came from it is what turned it into a Christmas movie. So even though it may not have been originally originally intended to be a Christmas movie, he still recognizes it as a Christmas movie.
Uh-huh.
So do with that what you will.
I forgot to write this down. Do you have when it was released?
The film?
Yeah.
1988.
The date?
Oh, no.
Because I want to say...
I think it was in the summer, though.
Oh,
I don't think it was released
say.
around Christmas time. Let's see. When was Die Hard
I'm looking it up.
released? How did we not
July.
look? Okay.
July
Yeah.
22nd. Well, poo. That would have solidified that.
Well, I think it still does with this statement from the director himself.
Yeah,
Granted,
fair
he
enough.
didn't write the film, but whatever.
Yeah.
He's the one that ended up making the film, so...
Right.
I think we can all now agree that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. We've debunked it here on Cult Cinema Podcast. You can stop the arguments on Reddit and Twitter and everything.
Yeah.
So,
The director said so.
yeah, he said it himself.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and
Okay.
talk about the movie itself. If you want to go ahead and get started on the scene by scene, unless you have anything you want to add beforehand.
Nope, we can just get right into it.
All right.
So, again, very 80s. So 80s in this movie. We open with a plane landing, and we see a man's white-knuckling his armchair, and it's obviously John McClane, the hero himself, and he does not like flying. So,
Nope.
the guy next to him kind of makes a joke about, multiple flights and what you can do, and he's like, yeah. So he gets up from his seat, over to the overhead compartment, grabs a huge teddy bear out of it in his luggage, and he gets out of the plane into the airport and lights up a cigarette.
Nice.
Because you can still smoke everywhere.
It's the 80s, man. No one cared.
Yep, no one cared. So we immediately cut from that to a big office party, and I'm assuming we'll know who he is in a minute, but he is the boss. He's making a big speech, thanking everybody for their hard work. And this is Very Merry Christmas from the Nakatomi Corporation. So we then pan down and we see Holly, and she does work here. And some douchebag's hitting on her, basically, and his name's Ellis. He sucks the whole time. But she very politely and tactfully tells him to basically fuck off. And
More or less.
I love her responses to
Yeah.
him. It's so great. But also it makes me sad because all these older movies, you obviously see a lot of that misogyny and bullshit that women have to deal with even to this day. So anyway, she calls him to talk to her kids, and she tells him she'll be home soon, and her daughter is asking if daddy's coming home for Christmas this year. And she says something also cute that her and Santa will see what they can do this year. It's very cute. So she asks to talk to the nanny, and the nanny gets on and she says, "Did Mr. McLean call?" The nanny says no. she says, we'll make the spare room up just in case. And as she gets off the phone, she like slams down the picture of their family that's on her desk behind her. So she's unhappy, of course, about this turn of events. We cut back to the airport, and we see a dude holding a sign with his name, and he says, I'm John McClane, and he says, well, I'm Argyle, and I'm your limo driver. So they sent a limo and everything for him, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think.
So there's a line in here where Argyle, or John is like, what do we do next? And Argyle's like, well, I don't know. I was hoping you could tell me this is my first time driving a limo. And McClane shoots back the line, it's all right, it's my first time riding in one. And this goes back to that same video that John McTiernan he talks about this scene specifically and how they wanted it to to emphasize John McClane as kind of like a working class hero kind of thing, where like he's just a normal kind of cop. He's he's a cop, but he's for the most part just a normal guy.
Yeah.
And he does go.
I'd say that describes him perfectly, for sure.
Yeah. McTiernan does kind of go into it quite a bit deeper, referencing like a famous painter, Jacques Louis David, and how his whole like when he started doing portraits on the side to make extra money, that was like a good example of the kings not being in control of the content. And so that's why you see a lot of in this film, anybody who is in a position of power, such as like the police chief, the FBI, they're all kind of seen as foolish. And John is, the middle class hero is seen as the intelligent one.
Right. Making all the right calls.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, touche. Interesting. Like you said, Argyle pretty much tells him, this is my first time, his first time. They pop in that limo and take off. He starts asking John a bunch of questions, and John basically is like, my wife moved out here, got a good job that turned into a really good career, but she's been out here 6 months. And Argyle asks him, well, why didn't you come to LA with her? And he says, well, I'm an LA cop, and I couldn't just drop everything. There's bad guys and blah, blah, blah to move out here with her. Didn't I say that? New York?
You said LA cop.
Oh, my bad. New York cop, yes. So she's been in LA, he's New York, and Argyle basically is like, you mean she moved out here and you thought she'd fail and come crawling back and she didn't, and now you're in this position. And I think it's funny that we off the bat just get this picture of, again, when you refer to John McClane as a hero of this movie, that he didn't just move out here with his wife who got this awesome job.
Yeah.
Because he could be a cop literally anywhere. But whatever.
He's a flawed man.
Right.
For
sure.
But.
Yeah. McClane's basically like, yep, so now we're here and I'm visiting. And he kind of pokes fun at him a little more, but then he asks him if it's okay if he listens to some music, and he said sure. So he pops in some tunes, and I think McClane even says, doesn't he say like, what about Christmas music?
Yeah.
And he's like, this is Christmas music. And
That's
it is.
great.
It is a Christmas song.
That's great societal foreshadowing right there, just for this entire film in general.
Right. We then see the limo pull up to her office building. It's getting dark outside, too. I'll mention that now. And Argyle tells him, look, if you don't score with your lady, I'll wait. I'll have your stuff in the car. Just give me a call. I'll come pick you up and take you to a hotel. If it's all good, I'll drop your bags off at the front desk, and I'll be on my way. So he's like a really nice dude in general.
Yeah. I have to say, like, during the beginning part of this film that's all kind of shot in, like, golden hour, visually, this film looks amazing, and it holds up very, very well. A lot of this film holds up extremely well, from the way that it's shot to even the, choreography with the fights, while they can be a little goofy at times, being, an 80s action film. It's choreographed very well, and the visual effects are out of this world, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But this film looks very stunning.
It still does, yeah. Agreed. The explosions, everything holds up, I think, really well, too. Also making it a classic film. So Argyle says he'll pull into the garage and wait, and just call him on the car phone, and hands him a card, and he goes on his way.
Did you ever have a car with a phone in it?
No.
No.
I'm never in a car phone. I've never been in a car with a car phone either. Way past my time.
Yeah.
And yours, it should be.
For sure. I've always found that concept really interesting, though, because now it's like, don't be on your phone while you're driving, you dingus. Like, that's how people get in accidents.
Right.
But
they used to be in your car.
It's like how doctors would promote smoking because it was bad for your health, and now they're like, don't smoke. It's funny how just a lot of things are perceived as like, oh yeah, this is what you should be doing, and then we look at it now as like, yeah, no, we were wrong on that one, Chief.
Yeah. Yep. And we'll continue to be wrong because people grow and learn, and that's the cycle of life.
Mm-hmm.
So McClane walks into a very quiet reception area and tells the guy at the front desk he's here to see Holly McClane. The guy tells him to type it into the box, and again, 80s, but again, pretty on point for probably the time. I'm sure buildings had, electronic directories at this point. And he starts looking through, all the M's and can't find her. And then he realizes that maybe it's her maiden name, and he is correct and upset about this. So he finally types in her maiden name, finds her. She's on the 30th floor. The guy tells him to go around the corner, and that's the only one. They're the only ones left in the building at the moment anyway. It's their Christmas party. So he walks over to the elevator, and he's, clearly looking around, scoping everything out. He's a cop. We then see Argyle park the limo, like he said, and wait. And McClane gets off the elevator and is looking all over at this fancy party. And some guy walks up to him and kisses him on the cheek and tells him Merry Christmas. And this is one of the first times he kind of makes a joke about LA people.
Well, I think he also does it in the when he first gets off the plane and in the airport, and he sees like two young people dressed all hip and colorful, being very affectionate with each other in public. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I forgot about that for sure. Yeah, he pokes fun at LA a lot in the movie, for sure.
It's like when I hear my grandfather talk about how Ohioans can't drive, even though he's lived here for most of his life. He just likes to say that because he was born in Texas.
Well, yeah. He does bump into Holly's boss, though, and he welcomes him. He's very nice and polite, and, asks him if he found the limo, got here okay, and And he walks him over to Holly's office, and we see douchebag Ellis doing blow on her fucking desk. Like, you have your own office.
With a private bathroom, we learned to find out.
Right. Why the fuck are you in here? So the nice boss, who is still being nice, asks him if he needs anything and introduces Ellis to Holly's husband, the cop. So put away your drugs, you fucking moron. And obviously McClane is just like, whatever. It is what it is. And then he makes a mention of the party, and I thought they didn't celebrate Christmas in Japan. And he says, well, we're flexible with everyone here, so it's obviously the least we could do to show appreciation. Holly walks in at that point and she's kind of surprised to see John there. I still never got why he went to the office and didn't just go to her house.
Well, because it was the company that flew him out and drove him in. Because
fair enough, but
they knew that by the time he would get in, I guess Holly would still be at work. So,
well, okay, fair. That's being very considerate then. Touche. So after Holly, they thank the boss both kind of together. Ellis, douchebag, tells her to show him the watch and pokes fun at her, and she's like, later. And he's like, it's a Rolex. We bought it for her. And you can just tell this fucking sleazy dude. I hate Ellis. I'm so glad. Spoiler alert, he dies.
Yeah.
I don't even care.
I love how, in his death scene, like, the one example of, like, corporate marketing is the Coca-Cola that he drinks later on. But I love the turn of events where, like, he ends up dying, so it, like, almost creates the message is, like, don't drink Coke unless you want to be executed by a terrorist.
Yeah.
So. And that's why I'm a Pepsi fan.
Coke and Pepsi, all dark pops, execute your intestines.
And kidneys.
Yeah. McClane asks where he can wash up, and Holly shows him to the bathroom. And she's being overly nice because she's clearly caught off guard that he's here. And, of course, he starts a fight with her because men. Just be nice. You're here. You're visiting. Her assistant pops in the bathroom, though, and says that everyone's kind of waiting for her to make a speech. And she says she'll be right back. And at this point, he kind of tells himself in the mirror to stop being a dumbass. And it's like, duh. Yeah. We then cut to seeing a big truck flying down the highway. And it pulls into the parking garage at Nakatomi Tower. And this alerts security. They aren't expecting anything. We see a couple cars pull out front and 2 guys walk right in through the door. I will mention at this point, their security is not so great.
Yeah.
Because I think you should have locked them doors a while ago.
Yeah, and it's just one dude on the...
Right.
at
Well,
the counter.
it's 2 dudes on that floor.
Oh, yeah.
But when... So these 2 guys walk in, they're making small talk, and then all of a sudden the blonde guy pops the other... He just shoots the guy at the desk. But the guy just around the corner by the elevators doesn't even hear him because they go and eventually shoot him too. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay. We then see the truck backing up to a loading dock in the garage, and it opens up and we see a whole team of people getting out, including our villain of the movie, Hans Gruber, played by Alan Rickman himself.
Yes.
Who's one of my favorite actors.
I'm convinced that Alan Rickman was just like a real life supervillain, because in like the behind the scenes he talks about how he didn't see Hans as like the villain of the movie.
No,
he explains him as just, and I quote, wants certain things in life, has made certain choices, and goes after them. So
yeah, he didn't think of himself as the bad guy.
No.
For sure. But the guy, one of the guys that walked in initially, so this blonde guy and an African-American guy whose name is Theo, he starts messing with all the tech stuff in the office and shuts down the elevators, escalators, locks the whole building down, the whole 9 yards. We then see him pull all the wires out so no one can really reverse what he's doing. That's movie magic for you, because that is not what would happen. As you can probably attest to, being in tech.
I don't know, kind of, sort of. I thought, like, when he's going through trying to, like, cut the telephone lines and everything, like, you've got one of them that's actually like trying to like professionally do it with wire cutters, and then one guy that's just going through everything with a chainsaw. Like, if you're still like, I guess if there were certain, he cuts through all of them, so like why even bother, you know, trying to clip it unless it has to be clipped at the right time? It's kind of confusing as to like how it works, and I don't really know how that all works. So
yeah, I would assume, like, let's say he shuts everything down, wouldn't it like reverse itself if you rip all the wires out?
I guess, I don't know.
I don't know. Or maybe not.
Maybe just an excuse for them to use a chainsaw in the movie.
I guess. And that's exactly what we kind of see next. They're, you know, they're hacking into all the power in the building, all the stuff. Just basically taking control over the whole building at this point. We cut back to McClane back in the bathroom. He's looking through his wallet at pictures of his kids. And he goes to pick up the phone in the bathroom to call Argyle to tell him the vote isn't in yet, but he'll let him know. And just as he's kind of trying to relay that, the phone cuts out.
Yeah.
So, and that's when we see Gruber's team kind of cut those phone lines. They get armed to the teeth, and they go up all the way up and into the party. They walk in, though, like nothing's going on, and they all have these guns, and nobody notices them at first. Until they start shooting. Which I thought was funny.
Yeah. It's like, oh, that must be the entertainment.
Yeah. Right. McClane, of course, hears the gunfire, and he kind of cracks the door to see what's happening. They're emptying all the offices. They go looking, you know, room by room, basically, and eventually get to the bathroom. But McClane has already exited the bathroom because he saw the hallway exit right across from there, and he did make it there. So, and he has a gun. Shocker, of course. Probably on that plane. He ends up on one of the floors that are still under renovation and tries to call out, but realizes at that point, yes, all the phones are dead. We cut back to Gruber and his men telling everyone to calm down. They're here because of the Nakatomi Corporation's reach around the globe. And they're just basically here to teach them what real power is. And they put off this vibe that they're terrorists, which is obviously what we refer to them later, but they're actually not. So they're basically just crowd controlling at this point. Gruber then asks everybody where Mr.
Takagi.
I'm going to pronounce Takagi. I'm going to pronounce it wrong, I'm sure, but I think I wrote it down correctly, so hopefully I won't. At first, Holly kind of grabs his arm and says, don't go forward. But Gruber eventually comes to him, so he obviously already knew who he was to some extent. Also, he's only one of a few Asian men in that room, so
There's
process
a couple.
of elimination, I guess. Yeah. He finally admits that he's him, and they take him up the elevator to his office. We cut back to McClane going through the hallways, again, just trying to figure out how to get some sort of communication to the outside world for help at this point. Mr. Takagi and Gruber are in his office, and he's commenting on, his office is obviously very lavish and nice. He's commenting on his models set up in his office, and at first, Mr. Takagi asked him if that's what this is about. Is it the expansion in Indonesia? He starts listing off some other countries that they've clearly either are or doing business in currently. He says no, but my associate has questions for you, and they basically just want, Theo asks him, for codes to override their vault. And Gruber says, I don't care about computers, I just want the code to the vault, I want the millions that are in it in bonds. And Mr. Takagi says, well, what kind of terrorists want money? And he's like, who said we're terrorists?
Yeah. So, their actions are very terrorist-like in the way that they take control of everything. They're just like...
They're thieves.
They're thieves.
That's all they are.
They're robbers. Yeah.
They're fancy thieves with all their tech people and guns. We then see McClane crawling around. He also, at this point, got to the office, and he's kind of on the ground, crawling around that huge table, and he's just listening into what they're saying, being a cop. Gruber insists on the codes and says, I'll count to 3, and I don't want to ruin this nice suit that you have on, which I thought was kind of a dick thing to say. Mr. Takagi says he doesn't know them. You'll have to get him on a plane to Tokyo or kill me. And he says, fine. And he shoots him, which is sad. McClane kind of makes a noise, though, at that point, and they hear him and go looking for him, but he, of course, gets away.
Just disappears like Batman.
Yeah. He does disappear a lot in this movie, and you're like, wait.
Yeah.
How'd he get there? For sure. Gruber then turns to one of the henchmen. Let's call him that. Oh, sorry, not to the henchman. He turns to Theo and makes sure and asks him, you can hack in, right? Maybe a question you should have asked before you shot the guy that might help you get the codes. But fine.
He's just looking for that reassurance.
Yeah. He says, of course, you didn't bring me here for my charming personality. And we then cut to some dudes on the roof, again, guns toting, and attempting to do more stuff. Cutting things, doing things, all at the same time. I thought it was weird, though, that they're trying to rig this roof at this point to blow, which we know later. And they're holding their guns still. I'm like, just put it down.
Yeah.
You're alone on the roof with, your other henchmen. No one's going to take your gun. We cut back to the office where Theo is explaining how long it will take to open this vault. It's going to be at least a few hours. We cut back to John yelling at himself why he didn't help Mr. Takagi, which, he couldn't, because then he'd be dead too. They would have just shot him. He pulls the fire alarm, thinking at that point, at least the fire department will try to show up and they'll see what's going on. But Gruber had already put one of his dudes at the front guard station or whatever you want to call it. And he radios to him, telling him to cancel that code and call the fire department. And, it's a false alarm. McClane sees the fire trucks, though, and at first is obviously excited. But then they turn their fire sirens off, and he realizes that they have control over everything in the building, and he's pretty much fucked. He walks up to the box, and that we just saw McClane hiding behind. Oh, sorry. I skipped a couple sentences. They realize what floor that alarm came off of, obviously, so they send somebody up there to look. McClane kind of ducks behind this box thing or pallet with boxes on it, and obviously the guy's walking around trying to find where he is. He shoots behind the box, but McClane's already moved. Again, Batman-like skills. And he gets the drop on the dude, though, and says, "Drop the gun, I'm a policeman." And the guy laughs and says, "Well, you won't shoot me, you're a policeman." Which isn't true in this movie at all. Or in life. They fight, of course. Oh, yeah, this is when we first see that McClane has no shoes on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we'll have no shoes throughout this movie.
Because we skipped over a part a little bit. So while he's on the plane on his way to LA, the guy he's talking to says that when he I don't know if we went in depth with, like, he says,
"Oh no, take your shoes off, get
when
some
you
coffee."
When you get home, take your shoes off and make fists with your toes on the carpet. And so he does that while he's waiting for Holly to finish her speech or whatever. And so that's why he doesn't have shoes.
You're right. I did skip over that. Thank you. Yep, for sure. So McClane obviously gets this guy down. They tumble down the stairs and he's killed in the fall. I assume he breaks his neck or something.
Yeah.
McClane takes his guns and radio and lighter, which will come back later, and searches the guy. He realizes that the IDs he has on him are, I guess, professional looking or
Professional
legit
looking fake IDs, yeah.
Yeah. He loads the guy into the elevator, tries to take his shoes, but they're too small. Womp womp. He then looks over at the Christmas decorations. Again, Christmas everywhere in this movie. He climbs into the elevator, but he stops it halfway down. We cut back to the party where Gruber's telling everyone that, they're in charge. Mr. Takagi didn't think that was true, so he won't be joining them forever. So they know he's dead. We then see the elevator open into the party room itself, and the dead guy's there. And McClane wrote on his sweater, "Ho, ho, ho."
Now I have a machine gun.
Now I have
Ho,
a machine
ho, ho.
gun. Yeah. And McClane is actually on top of the elevator, so we see them argue. They think maybe this is a security guard they missed. And as they're talking back and forth and calling each other by their name, McClane is writing all this down and, again, being a cop.
Mm-hmm.
He then ends up riding the elevator back up to another floor, also under construction. We cut back to the office where Gruber told the dude whose brother is dead, his name is Carl, and he starts flipping out. And Gruber tells him to calm down and stick to the plan. We then cut to Ellis and Holly, and as this is all occurring, she realizes, well, it's John, obviously, behind this.
Yeah.
Because he's not out here with us, and this is the kind of shit he would probably do. So, we see John then try to radio out for help from the roof, and it does reach 911, but Gruber and his men hear this too and realize that he's on the roof. Also, the dumb bitch that he called at 911 thinks this is a prank, so
Of course
she's less than helpful. Yeah.
Well, because they already had the fire alarm pulled there, so I can make sense why they would think that it's a prank at this point with consecutive, but it then of course turns into a boy who cried wolf situation. So
yeah, no, I get it, but she's less than helpful for sure.
Yeah.
But then she hears gunfire, which she reacts because it's so loud in her headphones, and I'm like, you didn't think that was gunfire? Like, whatever. At least she does radio to a car, though, to do a drive-by. So there will be a cop coming. We then cut to the police officer, I should say, getting some snacks, and he gets the call and heads over to the building. This police officer, I can't remember his name as an actor, but he was in the show Family Matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved him. So funny. He's good in this too, obviously. McClane, in the meantime, is having a shootout with like 4 dudes on the roof because they've gotten up there at this point. But narrowly escapes again and ends up back on the floor he started on, climbing through lots of construction type like little corridors because they have these little like doors to get to wiring and whatever else. He at this point looks pretty beat up though, and it just gets worse from here.
Yeah.
Honestly, his condition.
Willis had mentioned in an interview that he, did do a lot to get in shape for this movie, primarily because he wanted to do a lot of his own stunts, as he felt that would bring a higher production value to the film.
Yeah.
So,
well, good for him.
which I don't know if they had him actually hang off of a building with a fire hose, which we will get to later, but
Probably not.
Yeah.
No.
but he did smash a window with a chair. So, at least
Oh.
he did that.
Well, cool. I'm all about actors that try to do their own stunts. I think that's amazing.
For sure.
I mean, you're staying in this shape, great shape. You're doing
Yeah.
all these things. You're active anyway. You might as well let them try. Like, fuck.
Like Tom Cruise.
You have insurance.
Tom Cruise, who literally has his own insurance policy because of all the
Yeah.
crazy shit he does, like hanging off planes and jumping across buildings.
Yeah, but you know what? Good for him.
Yeah.
You only live once.
Right.
So, again, McClane has this radio, and the bad guys start radioing each other, and they think he's in the elevator shaft. So, Gruber basically is like, good, just shut him in there and move on, because the cops are probably already on their way. We then see McClane climbing down into air ducts with the strap of his gun initially, and he's trying to go from, like, point A to point B.
Yeah.
Which is, like, down and diagonal. Very risky.
Yeah. What was also another cool thing about the elevator shaft is that in this one, I would assume that they would have had to use the model for it, but there are a lot of shots where you're looking directly down the elevator shaft, and what they did was they built a miniature of an elevator shaft, but they used forced perspective, so it's basically kind of built like an inverted pyramid. So that way, when you look down it, this 12-foot model looks like it's 30 feet tall from the top of it.
Yeah.
I doubt they probably would have used that for this actual. I don't know how they would have done it for that. But they did construct for a couple of the scenes. I think they used it a lot for. There's a scene where McClane drops a bunch of C4 down the elevator shaft, and that's what they used to film that explosion coming up through the shaft. So.
Oh, cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
I just assumed in this one it was like a, what do I want to say? Again, a model, but like life size, so the guy is actually
Right.
hanging from something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they would have done that. Again, still looks great for the time.
For sure.
He just barely reaches the other duck, though, before falling to his death. And this is where he's crawling around in the vents, and we get one of the most famous lines where he pops open that lighter.
Come out
and
to
he
the
goes,
coast.
"Come,
We'll have
coast.
a few laughs.
We'll get together. We'll have a few laughs." And the camera's obviously really tight on his face as he shuts the lighter.
I want that as a poster, just right here. Just that
I
shot.
think it's a shirt.
Yeah, but I want a poster. Like, I want, like, a mural. Like, I have this empty space just right here. Like, I have my screen up in the back, but when I look at myself in my camera, it's just a light, and then there's just nothing.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be
You can
funny
get
if I just had
anything
John
printed
McClane's
nowadays.
face. Yeah.
You can get anything printed nowadays,
Right,
for sure.
yeah. Tune into the next episode to see if Gage has a giant Bruce Willis poster covering his entire wall.
Yeah.
Probably not, but
Hey, it could happen.
yeah.
So just at that moment, though, Carl looks down at the shaft and realizes that that's where he went, so he's needing to find him still. McClane can kind of see him, though, as he starts to shoot all the ducks, because at that point they are in kind of the same area. Carl then tries to poke the vents slowly, and McClane is getting his gun ready. Obviously, he's going to hit him at some point doing that, and it won't make a noise like a pop sound. But just in time, another dude comes in and tells him something in Swedish, and they run out. We then see the officer from earlier driving up to the building, and John makes it back into Mr. Takagi's office, and he sees the cop, so at first he's excited. But he realizes at that point he's just doing a drive-by, so he's got to do something to get his attention, that this is serious, and we need, call backup, basically. So the guard walks up to the door, and we cut back to Carl and stuff looking out the window as well. And we also cut to McClane in the office, who tries to break open the window, like you said. His own stunt, I think.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, though, it breaks, which is good, but it alerts all the bad guys to his position, so that sucks. The cop asks to look around, and the guard says sure. He's being obviously accommodating. We then see John in the office, and 2 guys from the roof pop in, and they have a shootout and fight as well. We then see the officer walk away to leave, basically calling in that nothing's going on. And just then, John tosses one of the bodies out the window and lands right onto his car. And that got his attention.
Yeah. What's interesting is that we then see machine gun fire towards the cop's car right after that. And when I first watched that, I thought it was John that was shooting at the cop.
Right.
But it's not. You don't. It's clearly another terrorist. You can see by like the over the shoulder and how it's a completely different gun that John has. But they don't really show like a setup for like a terrorist like coming up to the window and shooting out. At least I don't remember one.
No.
So
you are led to believe it could go either way. Yeah. For sure.
Because I thought it when I first watched this movie, I was like, why would he be taking that risk and shooting at the cop? And it's like, oh no, it's somebody else.
Yeah. Because he reverses the car and wrecks it off a ditch, kind of across from the building. And then we cut back to police dispatch and we see like 80 cops arrive. So he did call it in. The officer called it in. So Gruber tells everyone on his team to relax. It's just the beginning. We knew cops would show up eventually. So just stick to the plan. It's going to be fine. Just then the radio trips up and Gruber says, look, I asked for radio silence and it's McClane. And he tells him, look, security guard. And McClane goes, I'm not a guard. And then Gruber has this obvious, like, well, who the fuck are you look on his face. Yeah. And Gruber tells his guys to go find him and stay off the radios and see who's missing out of the people in the office, which, he doesn't work there, so that doesn't really matter either. They McClane and Gruber kind of banter back and forth on the radio as McClane's grabbing more guns and getting out of the office just as his guys are arriving in. Gruber says, do you think you're a cowboy? And second famous line, maybe first, from the movie. As soon as he says that, McClane says, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, and walks out a door right before his guys walk in. Again, stealth.
This is something that, so they did have a lot of like police officers and detectives on site of the film to make sure that like they were accurately representing like police action. And according to Bruce Willis, they helped him a lot to find that like kind of dark humor that John has throughout the movie. And,
oh, cool.
Because they, oftentimes these officers themselves would find themselves in a life or death situation and that dark humor kind of kicks in. And so Bruce Willis made sure to take that and run with it.
Nice.
And with that, John McTiernan has talked about how the original like script and storyline for the movie was a lot darker in terms of like the little witty humor that's in the movie from John McClane and Hans wasn't really there, but they kind of expressed McTiernan kind of expressed the importance of how he wanted to have that kind of humor in the movie, and that's what he goes in to talk about, the joy that it brings, and with that and all the other things on set. I mean, that movie ends with a Christmas song.
Right.
So that kind of talking about how that led up to it being a Christmas movie.
Oh.
So.
Right on. Again, we cut to a news station, and a reporter at this point, they know what's going on. He's had kind of skipped over that, but he has a CB2, which I think a lot of reporters do, even to this day, probably have a police station or channel just running in the background. But he's demanding a truck and to try to get to the building because he heard, all this commotion on the cop radio. Everybody kind of argues with him at first, but eventually he gets permission to go. We cut back to Gruber's men telling him they found another one of their guys and his bag is missing. And apparently that one had the detonators in it they need after putting all the bombs on the roof, which we now know there's bombs on the roof. So Gruber radios to Theo, and he is cutting the vault now and just checking in with him. We kind of have back and forth of that throughout the movie, too. This vault is a very odd setup of... I don't know what they were going for here as far as like what they thought a vault like that would look like, but it's weird.
I don't know.
I don't
know how they're actually set up, so I'm not going to attest to the accuracy of how they go about this. So,
touche. I guess I don't really either, but they look more real in movies now, I guess, than this does to me now. Maybe
big
is
old
what I'm
box
thinking.
with the wheel that you use to open it.
Well, it's also like it's shaped in like a.
It's like cylindrical.
Like almost, yeah, and there's like tiers to get into the center of it, which is, I don't know. Fine, I'm being nitpicky about that. Whatever. The officer from before then gets on the radio and gets to talk to McLean, but Gruber can hear him too, so this whole time, back and forth. McLean is asking how many weapons they have. Sorry, McLean is telling the officer how many weapons they have. They have fake IDs that look real legit, all that jazz. He's like, this is a weird scenario. I don't think they're terrorists. And we find out he's right. The officer then asks, what can I call you? And he says, for now, my name is Roy. And the cop says, all right, hang tight in a safe place and just let us do our jobs. A deputy chief then pops onto the scene, who's an asshole.
Dwayne T. Robinson? Yep. I don't know. Fuck that guy.
And he plays a dick in almost everything that he's in. I feel like, this actor. Yeah. But he tells the officer, whose name is Powell. I just wrote that down at this point.
Al Powell.
All right. And he says, what are we dealing with? What's going on? And initially he tries to explain it to him. And he's like, well, we don't know that that's even not one of the terrorists. So, basically tells Powell that he's being stupid and he's, I'll take it from here.
Some of those things that the deputy says that do make sense. Like the idea of like, well, this could just be somebody from the inside that's tricking you. Like that idea does make sense, but
I agree.
Of course, we're all led to believe that Al is correct because he is correct.
Right. But as a cop, especially one just popping up, fair enough, have the questions. But don't be a dick about it, is all I'm saying. We cut back into the office building, and Holly has asked to see Gruber. She walks in and just asks for the pregnant woman, who's her assistant, to have a couch or go into an office with a couch. And he's like, well, I'll bring one out. She says, fine. And she says, look, people are going to need to go to the bathroom unless you want to clean up a big mess out there, which he agrees. So, again, he's not being a horrible person to these people, but he is murdering people. So there's that.
He respects their human rights until he doesn't and shoots you in the head.
Right. We then see Argyle in his car, and he's watching the news. He turns on the CB, and now he can hear like what's going on because he didn't know anything was happening at this point. The cops outside are now trying to storm the building. And again, Deputy Chief is like telling Powell he doesn't know what he's doing. And Powell's like, look, we don't know how many hostages are in there. And the Deputy Chief's like, fuck it, we're going in. We don't care. McLean then sees huge spotlights, and he radios to Powell again. And he basically tells McLean, I can't talk right now. And we kind of just watch as the cops try to storm the building. We then see Argyle in his limo, and he starts driving around the garage. And I don't know what the point of him driving around the garage was at times. Maybe you can explain that.
Argyle,
they don't show him going anywhere. Yeah.
I think he's in like the same spot for the entire movie, just parked in that garage.
No, we see him start to drive around now.
I think he's just probably trying to kill time in the parking garage because he's still waiting on confirmation from John on what the next move is.
Well, okay, fair enough. I mean, it ends up working out in the end that he's driving all over. So maybe he was looking for like John or looking for a way in or something like that.
Maybe.
I don't know. So then we flip back to tons of cops, all over the place. And Gruber's telling his men to get ready because they're coming in. More scenes of cops. And McLean is yelling at them to not storm in. And at this point, we hear Theo over their radios telling Gruber that his men where they're entering from. So he is now sitting at a main hub or whatever, and he's telling them where they're entering from because they start shooting from the building. And the deputy chief sees this, does tell all the officers to pull back, but some of the guys are like, we're already entering, we're already going in. Some of them radio that they're not stopping and to send the car. Again, we just see Theo telling them where they are, and we get different cuts of bad guys like pushing cargo bins through this hallway. And at first I thought this was like a huge machine gun, but no, it's a fucking missile launcher.
Yeah.
And they straight take out this LAPD like armored car and they blow that thing up.
So what's interesting is that so this movie was shot at what at the time was the newly built Fox Plaza, owned by 20th Century Fox, who produced the film. And so one of the things that the effects team had to really think about was, while some of them had experience doing high-level pyrotechnics in buildings and around buildings, this was some of their first times doing it in a 34-foot building.
Yeah. And
so they had to worry about that. I believe the car was real. They did do the explosion outside of the building. But yeah, that was that. And with all the pyrotechnics going off, not only did they have to worry about trying to figure out how to do everything safely in this newly built building that, was the production team that was funding the movie.
Right. They
also had to worry about the other people on the other floors that were just trying to do their jobs and were putting in noise complaints from all these, special effects guys that were blowing stuff up at the lower levels.
Yep. Because that's exactly what happens next. McClane ties a piece of C4 to a chair with a computer on it and tosses it down that air shaft, and it just completely blows up that bottom level of the building.
And that's where they used the model where they had some kind of homemade explosive thing that would go up, and that's how. And the 12-foot model.
Huh. Interesting. McClane radios back to Pal, and the deputy chief kind of pops on the radio at that point and bitches at him. And again, he's not believing that he's not one of the terrorists. But Pal tells him to kind of hang in there. And Argyle can hear all this on his radio too. So we kind of cut back and forth to Argyle at this point as well. And then we cut to stupid asshole Ellis and Holly arguing. He's doing more coke because, of course. He basically tells her he's going to go talk to the guys. And at first you don't know why, but he's going to try to do something about the situation. He gets into the office with Gruber, and he says he can give him something. And at first you're like, oh, this motherfucker. He's about to tell him who John is, where he can find him, blah, blah, blah. Ellis is rambling on and on, though, about random bullshit. And Gruber is just very condescending to him, which is actually pretty fucking funny.
Ellis is giving off big ShamWow infomercial guy vibes, for sure.
Oh, yeah. He's a salesman.
Yeah. It's just kind of that salesman attitude that you just, when you hear it, you immediately want to turn it off or punch the person talking in the face kind of thing. Yeah.
He has the most punchable face ever.
100%. But yeah. Just want to put that out there.
Yeah. But of course, he does tell him who McClane is, and he says he can give him to Gruber. Fuck you, Ellis. I'm glad you die.
Yeah.
In a couple scenes from now.
Dickhead.
Right. McClane and Pal have some more conversation. They kind of are joking around at this point. It's a cute rapport that they end up having at the end of the movie. Gruber cuts in and he says, I know who you are now, calls him by his name. And I've got someone here who wants to talk to you. So Ellis gets on the radio and he's like, I told him you were my guest at the party. And McClane kind of flips out and he's like, no, you don't want to do this at all. Because Ellis is like, all they want is the detonators, man. Just tell them where they are and they'll let everybody go. And he's like, Ellis, stop. You don't know who these people are. And, of course, 2 seconds later, we hear a gunshot. And it's Gruber, and he's killed Ellis. Womp womp. / I don't care.
Yeah.
So the deputy chief then flips out because they also heard this happen. And so they realize that Gruber's just going to shoot anybody at will. And he basically says that McClane let that guy die, which is like, that's not at all how that conversation went.
Yeah.
But fine. So Gruber finally gets on the radio to speak to the deputy chief, and he demands these random things just to tie up their time. And he wants a release of a bunch of prisoners from like a bunch of different countries and areas.
Who he doesn't know. He's just saying this to distract the police from whatever they got going on inside the building.
Exactly. They're buying time because
Yeah.
they still need to get into this vault, and they haven't yet.
Mm-hmm.
We cut back to Carl, who is still hunting McClane down and trying to find the detonators. McClane talks to Pal again, and he knows Gruber doesn't care about prisoners, so that's weird that he is asking for this request.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI then arrives, of course, to take over / fuck even more stuff up. We then see Gruber checking all the wiring near the roof, and he'd sent Carl to look for McClane. He was going to go check the roof. And I was always kind of lost why they wanted to blow up the roof.
So
they didn't take down the whole building.
Yeah, they kind of explain it towards the end, but the idea was that they blow the roof of the building to fake their deaths, to fake the deaths of the surviving terrorists.
Okay, that
so
makes
that
sense
way, because
then.
his whole logic behind that is that, you know, you steal $640 million, they will hunt you down, but if they think you're dead, then they won't even bother.
True.
So
That's true. So he's checking all the wires up there, and he turns around, and McClane's there, though, with his gun. And he does a really brilliant thing and acts like he's one of the hostages, not Hans.
his American accent, though, is ass. I'm just going to put that out there.
Oh, it's
though.
terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely terrible. McClane's basically like, why are you up here, man? You know? And he's like, oh, he makes up excuses and tells him how he got separated. And he's like, I'll just go back down with the others. And he's like, no, stick with me. It's dangerous up here if you want to stay alive. You know, I'll make sure you're okay. We then see them talking, and McClane still isn't telling him, like, who he is or anything. So he clearly is on to who he is, because why else would anybody be up there?
Right.
And there's no way a hostage would have gotten away from these people.
Yeah.
But McClane does hand him a handgun. Gruber, of course, tries to shoot him with said gun, not 2 seconds later, but also is asking about the detonators and why he wants them. And he basically tells him his whole evil plan of blowing up the roof to make it look like they died, as you said. And Gruber goes to shoot him, but no bullets. Shocker.
Nice. John's smart.
However,
They did try to trick him, though, because you see earlier John looks at, like, a board of, like, employees that work on that floor or whatever.
right.
And so, but clearly Hans
And
has
he
seen
says
this.
a name.
Yeah, clearly Hans has seen this as well and uses this to his advantage and actually says a name to, again, try to trick John into thinking that he is just one of the hostages. But John is, like, chess master 4 steps ahead and still
Right.
gives him an empty handgun.
Very clever, though,
Yeah.
on Gruber's part.
I'm guessing
Sure.
it must have been the phony American accent, because clearly you can tell that it's just Alan Rickman doing an American accent, and so he must
Right.
have, like, you know, he's heard Hans's voice over the radio.
Yeah, so
So-
he obviously couldn't sound like him.
And he,
Yeah.
you know, pokes fun at it a little bit, you know, saying, like, that's a real, you could, you know, be in the movies with that accent right there. And I think that, I take that more as, like, a condescending response to Hans. So,
I agree. Yeah. But still, pretty brilliant on the fly thinking
Yeah.
at that point. But just then the elevator dings and action movie shootout ×3. I think this is like our third one so far.
they look great, though.
They do. They still look great. Those, you know, bullets coming off the guns look real. I remember reading an article with when they interviewed Kate Beckinsale for Underworld, the first one. And she made a point to mention that in action movies, they don't like when the actors flinch when the gun's going off. Because obviously they're blanks. They're not shooting real bullets. So they train you over and over to not do that. So it looks like you've been doing this your whole life. You know, you're not just randomly shooting a gun now, because you would flinch. And I think in these kind of action movies, one, they don't have a lot of close-ups on your face, so they don't care about stuff like that.
Right.
But every time I see a shootout, any movie, I think of that, and I think of, I wonder if they shot a bunch of guns and conditioned them to not flinch. Like,
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good move. There's a whole story about how, I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy who plays the T-1000 in Terminator 2, I think it's like
Right.
Patrick something. He like studied for a while, like training himself to fire a handgun without blinking, so that he could seem more robotic, and it works great.
yeah. Yeah. She made kind of the same comment, like, you could blink, but, you know, they also discourage that a lot, she was saying, about the types of guns they're firing. You wouldn't really have, like, a huge light that would make you blink, so you shouldn't. And plus, she was a vampire, and it was like, that goes in a whole nother tangent, but...
Plus, the shootout looks also really good, likely because they're using blanks, where the alternative to that nowadays is just doing visual effects and then just using, like, an blowback airsoft pistol or something like that. But it's very difficult to replicate a proper muzzle flash in CG, because there's a lot of things that you have to take into effect. Like, not only, like, making sure that the muzzle flash is in the right spot, but also making sure it's the right size, and making sure that the smoke trails are accurately represented, and making sure that that light, you know, is also illuminating the rest of the environment that it's around, because it is light that's being emitted. So you have to, there's a whole thing. But if you just shoot with blanks, you know, in this action,
You've got it,
right?
yeah.
If you're shooting with blanks, you don't have to worry about that, and it's because, you know, you don't have a lot of people on the same screen at the same time, there's less of a safety concern, because whoever is shooting the blank, there's not actually someone in front of you, because blanks can be deadly. We've seen that time and time again with a lot of mishaps on movie sets. So,
Yeah, I get it. I get why you don't always want to do that.
yeah.
So, action movie shootout. Gruber is yelling at Carl to shoot the glass, though, around McClane, because he remembers he's got no damn shoes on, and he's going to have to run over said glass to get to that exit door, which is obviously what he does, and that, I'm sure, sucked ass.
Yeah.
But no, McClane dropped the detonators. We cut back to see the reporters, who now know who McClane is. The reporter thing, I only mention it because of the one scene that happens at the end. So, we cut back to the office building, and Holly knows McClane is still alive because the bad guy seems super pissed. So she's like, yeah, he did that.
Yeah.
For sure. We then see McClane. He got himself into a bathroom, but again, his feet are fucked. They look so gross. Glass everywhere.
His white wife beater is now completely brown, after all the shootouts and gunpowder and dust and dirt that's in those vents he's been crawling around in.
And he wraps his feet in it.
Yeah.
Which is gross. But I guess
You
I would
gotta do what you gotta do, man.
Yeah, my feet can't bleed.
Yeah.
Gotta walk.
Yeah.
We then see Theo radio to Gruber and tell him that he's super close, so they're about in the vault. McClane then radios Pal again, and Pal's basically like, we got to pull down here to see how long you're going to survive, which is funny. And again, some more banter. And we get into this conversation of Pal and why he was at a desk. He had mentioned that he's a desk person. He was about to go home when he got this call, and now he's involved in this crazy situation. And Pal says that he shot a kid, and it was the wrong person. And he feels terrible about that. So he went back to the desk because he doesn't want to use his gun again. And I think that's a really sweet story to pop in there.
Mm-hmm.
He also says the FBI are here now. And Gruber also sees the FBI. And he knows that they're going to arrange to have the power shut off. So I don't know how he knows all this, but it's pretty smart, the whole movie. We then cut to the FBI, obviously getting them to shut the power down. Ugh.
But this is part of the terrorists' plan, because they mentioned earlier how the 7th out of the 6 vault doors, one has an electromagnetic seal that can't be shut off locally. So they're relying on this situation, with authorities getting involved to shut down the power for this entire block, so that way they can get through that last and that final door that they need to get through, so they can get all their $600 million worth of bonds or whatever.
Yeah, which is very smart.
Yeah.
because that's exactly what happens. And they, sure enough, get through that vault. McClane radios Pal again and tells him, look, if shit goes south, he wants him to tell his wife all this very sweet stuff, and he gets emotional, and it's very nice, which I'm going to go ahead and say at this point, it's an action movie trope.
Yeah.
That you
tell my wife
I
love her type.
Yep.
That type
tell
of
my wife I love
that
her.
type of character arc. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, because they all do it.
Yeah.
And Pal's like, you tell her yourself, man. You're getting out of here.
It's cheesy as shit, but it's good.
It happens every time.
Yeah.
McClane then tries to figure out what Gruber's doing with the roof. And he goes back to the roof. And this asshole reporter then pops in again. And he's at the fucking house. He's at the McClane house.
Where their kids are. Yeah.
Yeah. And he threatens the nanny he'll call INS if they don't let him in and talk to the kids. I'm like, you can't fucking talk to children.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here. So that's why I mentioned the reporter, because he's a fucking dick.
Doesn't that guy also play like the asshole in Ghostbusters that sets all the ghosts free in New York? Isn't it the same actor? I'm pretty sure it is. I think he just has a beard in that movie. But
you might be right.
Good actor, but fuck every
I know
character
who he
he's
is.
played.
Yeah, he's one of those, hey, it's that guy.
Yeah,
like, I don't remember your name.
He plays the asshole in like every other 80s movie.
Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, touche. Same thing. We cut back to McClane, who has found all the explosives now, and he tries to radio Pal, but just then Carl fucking pops up and takes his radio, and they fight, of course. More action movie scenes.
Yeah.
We then see the news, and Gruber's also watching this, and at this point, I can't remember if the news says Holly's name, or if he looks over and sees her picture and realizes that's her, but...
Well, they talk about how they're at the McClane house, and because Hans now knows that it's John McClane, and Hans remembers seeing the kid in one of the other family photos that Holly has up on her desk. So he sees the little girl. He knows John McClane's name. He knows that girl is in a photo in Holly's office. He does the math, pulls up that picture frame that Holly had put down at the beginning of the film, saying that John is Holly's husband.
Right. Dun, dun, dun.
It all comes together, and it's brilliant.
All of it. And he now takes Holly hostage specifically, so that sucks. We then see the FBI kind of flying around with helicopters, and all the hostages are being led to the roof.
We forgot to mention the two FBI agents are Special Agent Johnson and Special Agent Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
Credited as Big Johnson and Little Johnson in the credits, which
my god, that's funny.
So happy about that.
I wonder who's big and little.
I think Big Johnson is the white guy, and then I think Little Johnson is the African American guy. I think
because he's younger.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Because while they're in the helicopter, White Johnson.
He makes a joke about Vietnam.
He's like, it's like fucking Saigon, and then other Johnson is like, I was in junior high, dickhead.
Right.
That was funny.
That was funny. So we see them flying around initially, and the hostages being led to the roof, and that's kind of intercut with McClane and Carl still fighting. Gruber then starts grabbing all the money from the vault. Oh, because they're in the vault now. After the power went out, that was like their last barrier, and now they're in the vault. And Holly is basically like, you're nothing but a thief. This is stupid. And he's like, I'm an exceptional thief, and now I'm a kidnapper. So, fuck off, woman. Shut your mouth. They have a funny back and forth, too, I think. Yeah. McClane finally kills Carl. He strings him up with a chain.
Yeah.
That pulls him really high up, I feel like. Like when you...
And we'll put...
In 2 seconds.
We'll put that in quotes, too, for now. Kills Carl.
Right. Fair enough. Gruber then grabs... Again, we just see him grabbing all the money. Back and forth. And the stupid FBI and the cops on the ground... They don't make any good decisions at this point. And we come back to the roof, and McClane gets up there, and he's trying to help everybody get back downstairs. He does find Holly's assistant and says, why isn't she with us, with you guys? And she says, well, they took her back down to the 30th floor vault. So everything happens on the 30th floor in this movie that we now realize. McClane then tells everybody to go back downstairs. They're going to blow up the roof, but nobody listens initially. So then he starts shooting his gun in the air to scare everybody. So naturally, the FBI flying around the helicopter think he's one of the bad guys. Yeah. Yep, and try to shoot him as well. And he runs and kind of ducks off another part of the roof and finds an emergency fire hose and ties himself to it. And just barely gets off the roof by the time they blow it up. Luckily, all the hostages were okay. They got down there. And he ends up hanging from that hose for a second before finally shooting out a window and falling inside just as the hose falls off the roof. And it almost takes him with it. But, oh shit, it's tied to his waist. So it now starts pulling him out of the window. And he just, again, in the nick of time, gets let off so he doesn't get taken out the window. And
we also see that the explosion also hit the helicopter that the FBI agents were in. And so with this, of course, they did do a lot of pyrotechnics in and around the actual Fox studio. But I think it was Boss Film Productions, or Film Studios, the kind of visual effects company behind this film, actually made a 12-foot, or maybe no, it was a 30-foot miniature of Nakatomi Plaza, or the Fox Plaza.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and with that, for the helicopter, it was an RC helicopter, one of the big. They had someone develop a huge RC helicopter that they flew, and it looks great. It looks perfect. It looks like a real helicopter has exploded in the sky and is falling out of the sky. And because everything is practical and miniatures, it just looks so good. Yeah,
it does. It still looks really good because the entire thing seams to blow up for sure. The entire roof.
I didn't see anything about. I would assume that they probably used that same model maybe for when John drops the TV monitor bomb down the elevator shaft and it blows out that bottom story. I don't know if they would have also used the model for that as well. I would assume, because I would assume that setting up, a giant explosive in a 34-foot building would probably be a no-no.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I didn't get that far in my research.
Well, we have to assume it's some kind of model because you're obviously not blowing up an actual building.
Yeah.
So the hose falls. It gets it off his waist. He's okay. But just as he's getting up and collecting himself, the helicopter that had blown up now is falling into the building, and it falls, of course, right into the floor where John ended up. So that almost kills him too. We cut back to Gruber kind of pushing Holly around, and at this point McClane can see them. So I guess he made it to the 30th floor from the roof? Question mark.
I don't know. We quickly then cut to Argyle, though, who notices an ambulance loading stuff into the back, but not people. So he's like, this is weird. And he just crashes right into the ambulance and then beats up Theo, who's in the driver's seat. Argyle's the real homie. He does not give a shit. He'll just drive his fucking limo into it. Yeah. Way to go, Argyle.
I know. Saving the day.
Oh, yeah.
Also saving the day. We cut back inside and we see McClane is going to confront Gruber. And, of course, he still has Holly. We have a good old-fashioned showdown. And McClane puts down the gun as asked. And, again, more witty banter between the two of them. And Gruber says, what did you say before when I called you a cowboy? Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. And everyone laughs. And it's just enough time for Holly to duck while McClane shoots Gruber and the remaining two guys to his, I think, right or left.
It's just one other guy. It was the guy who originally was the desk guard is with him.
Okay.
So he lands one in Hans' shoulder or something, and then lands the guard guys square in the head.
Cool. Yes. So he's taken them down, but Hans falls out a window because, like you said, he didn't shoot him in the head or anything. And fuck, Holly's tacky ass Rolex watch is stuck to him somehow. And he's pulling her out the window as he falls too. McClane dives for her and gets it off just in the nick of time. And Gruber falls to his death.
What's great about that is that when they did the stunt with Alan Rickman hanging from like a fake set, when they had someone holding on to him or whatever he was holding on to, they were like, all right, Alan, we're going to release you on 3. They went like 1, 2, and then let him go. So his reaction that you see of him falling in slow motion is Alan Rickman's genuine reaction to being let go from this drop. And it's so good.
I read that too. Yeah. Good call there for sure. So he did, obviously, presumably falling 30 feet, 30 stories. I don't know. We're now ground level, and it's obviously fucking total destruction down there. The news people are back, and McLean and Holly are walking out together. Police and everyone are swarming them, but Pal pops up and smiles at McLean, and he like walks right to him, and they have a huge hug, and it's super cute.
It's really nice.
I loved it. You know, very heartwarming. McLean then introduces Holly, and the dumbass chief walks up to him, initially, like, obviously yelling at him about all the damage and stuff he's got to answer for, and it's like, whatever, bro. But, oh no, Carl fucking pops up out of nowhere, and we thought he was dead, and he's not. But before he can shoot anybody, Pal pulls out his gun and shoots him. So, hopefully getting some of his confidence back as a cop.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's so great. It's like the perfect one to like that perfect ending kind of thing.
Yeah, because we then see Argyle drive through with the fucked up limo. Him and Holly get in. The one newscaster tries to talk to him at first, but McLean punches him right in the face.
Holly punches him in the face, which is even better.
Holly does?
Yeah.
I thought he punched. My bad. She punches him in the face. We then see John and Holly kiss in the back of the limo. Christmas music playing in the background, and Argyle drives them away. And that's the movie.
I love this movie. I watch it every year around Christmas time because it's a Christmas movie. It's a great action movie. It's a great Christmas movie. It's a great Bruce Willis movie. It's just a great movie all around. I have no real tropes with this movie. Like,
I don't either.
So
some of the dialogue, I'm like, okay, 80s.
Yeah.
But it still works, you know? Everything works in this movie still.
100%.
Holds up really well.
It absolutely does. Visually, in terms of the writing, the plot, it's so good. It's so good. And it will continue to be good for many more years.
It will.
Of course, you know, they've released an ass ton of sequels that are kind of hit or miss.
Some of them for sure. I don't hate some of the newer ones. The one with like Justin Long in it and Timothy Olyphant was pretty good.
Yeah, I think the second one is good, and then I think is Die Hard with a Vengeance. Is that the third one,
I think that's the fourth second one.
But yeah, the one with Justin Long, I remember watching it, and I didn't think it was that bad.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad.
But yeah, but you could just watch the first one and you could be done, kind of like The Matrix or Pacific Rim. You know, these are one of those few franchises that just, you know, could have just had a single movie and it would have been fine. Because of course, I think it was like some battery company ended up remaking a scene from Die Hard recently within like the last year or two. It's some car battery company, and it was just cringe as hell. I hate when companies do that, where they're like, oh, we bring in this actor from this movie that was done 30 years ago to reenact a scene for our ad.
Right, so tacky.
Yeah. But
do you have any more behind the scenes or fun facts?
So I kind of mentioned everything already that I had. One thing that I hadn't mentioned was the guy who plays Carl, Alexander Godunov, I think is how you pronounce it. I apologize if I'm butchering that. But besides being an actor, he's also a professional ballet dancer, which I made note. I'm sure definitely helped out with those karate skills that he shows off when facing off against Bruce Willis near the end of the film.
Yeah, and he's very nimble.
Yeah. But this was like his first experience doing an action film, and he was supposedly really excited for it. Of course, like I mentioned, the models that they built, which are extraordinary and certainly help, you know, the film hold up to this. Usually, you know, from what I've seen, using miniatures and practical effects definitely helps with it. Like a film aging really well, because when you look at stuff from the late 90s, early 2000s that was primarily CG, you're like, that looks like ass. Yeah.
Well, early CG was pretty much all garbage.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you could have just done practical effects and it would have looked better.
Right. Yeah. But that's pretty much all I got. I'm sure you got a ton of trivia.
I have some. You mentioned some of them, which is awesome that you found the same stuff.
Nice.
This movie, though, was based on Roderick Thorpe's 1979 crime novel, Nothing Lasts Forever, which was a sequel to his 1966 novel, The Detective, which that was actually turned into a movie. The Detective was.
Which this
as well.
I think Die Hard does do also a really good job of playing out like a noir film. It's very much like a classic like detective noir film as well. So if you're into that, definitely check this movie
Definitely
out.
check those books out too. It sounds like they were really good. In 2013, Thorpe's long out-of-print book was resurrected and coincided with the film's 25th anniversary. So The Detective was popular then, but it quickly, even after the movie came out, like, out of people's minds, basically. It wasn't a great movie either, I'm assuming. So they did not want Bruce Willis at first for John McClane. They wanted this movie to be a big blockbuster summer hit. So it was rumored that everyone from Sylvester Stallone, Harrison Ford, Robert De Niro, Charles Bronson, Nick Nolte, Mel Gibson, Richard Gere, Don Johnson, Burt Reynolds, and Richard Dean Anderson, yes, MacGyver himself, were all considered for the role, and they all declined it. Nobody said yes. Nobody read for it except for Willis. So
that's great, though, because it worked out so... It couldn't have worked out better.
Really, it couldn't have. Could have been a very different... You know, I love Don Johnson, though. I am a huge Don Johnson fan.
What is he in again?
He was in a cop show with Cheech Marin for a lot of my childhood.
Okay.
My dad liked that show, so I grew up on that show.
Gotcha.
But he's also married to Melanie Griffith, and he's Dakota Johnson from 50 Shades fame's father. So, well, obviously, that's her father. Melanie Griffith's her mother.
Gotcha.
So,
gotcha.
But he's just an all-around good dude, too. Like, he's done tons for, like, charity work and stuff like that, so.
Richard Gere as John McClane is just the funniest shit in my head. I think that's...
Couldn't imagine that.
Yeah,
Burt Reynolds, too. I think he was maybe a little too old at this point.
I don't know. Maybe if they made this movie 10 years earlier, it would have been a good fit.
Yeah.
That mustache, man. It's hypnotizing.
It really is.
Yeah.
Ladies. This was Alan Rickman's feature film debut, though. He had not done a film before this, so that's pretty cool. You talked about the Fox Studio building that they used for Nakatomi Plaza. It has 4 sequels, and Die Hard has also spawned a slew of video games and comic books, which I didn't know anything about either.
I knew
of
that there
those.
was a famous arcade game, but it has, like, if you've played it or seen footage of it, it has, like, nothing to do with the movie. Like, it's kind of crazy how just, like, ridiculous the game is. I think it was published by, like, Sega in the late 90s or something. But, yeah.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Never seen it. The scene in which McClane jumps from that elevator shaft to the diagonal down elevator shaft, they did use a model, but it was, a few feet tall to, make it look realistic when they went back in post. But his stuntman missed that vent that was supposed to be the first vent by a lot, and he fell down to that other vent pretty far.
Wow.
So it scared everybody, apparently. In order to get that really realistic shot of guns and gunfire in the movie, John McTiernan, the director, again, used blanks, but he modified the guns to be super loud. And in one scene, Willis he shoots a terrorist through a table, but it put him in really close proximity to the second terrorist, and he actually suffered some permanent hearing loss because that gun went off too close to his ear for that scene. Yeah.
Yikes.
He talks about it in a few interviews, even to this day, that he can't hear. You can't talk to him in his left ear, let's say, and because he has that hearing loss. So,
Oof.
Crazy. Willis also has multiple sets of fake feet since he was running around barefoot all the time. If you look down on the scene, though, where he's pulling the glass out of his feet in the bathroom, you can actually see one of the feet's toes that are very, close together, that are obviously not real. The line "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker" became the film's most defining line and unofficial catchphrase, and it is used in all 4 Die Hard movies. All of them. He says it at least once. Bruce Willis thought that was hilarious, though, that they kept going with it, and it became a really synonymous line through the film because
sure.
he ad-libbed it and didn't think they were going to keep it.
That's great.
Yeah. And finally, Die Hard destroys a fuckload of glass in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
They shoot it. People jump through it. It's pulled out of feet. All total, the movie's production budget spent on glass was $130,000. Which I think is a lot of money.
That is a lot
on
of
glass.
Money. That is.
Yeah. And those are my fun facts.
All right. What an awesome movie.
Yes. It still holds up. It's still really good. It's still
Yeah.
a fun time. And you can still watch it at Christmas time with your family.
Absolutely. I encourage everybody to have a yearly watch. It's like, there's Christmas Vacation, there's Christmas Story, which in my opinion is extremely overplayed, specifically Christmas Story.
Yeah, I can't watch that anymore.
Yeah,
We
no.
watch Christmas Vacation every year.
Christmas Vacation
Your
is
dad and
good.
uncle love it.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, try if you're on the side that's like, oh, Die Hard's not a Christmas movie, give it another watch around the holidays specifically and see.
Yeah. See how much fun it is.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, before we end the episode, what do we got going on for next week? I know that we were going to be picking a movie.
We're going comedy for January.
That's right.
Yep.
We're doing comedy.
Yep. Comedy month for January.
And is it Big Daddy that we're doing first?
Yep, we're going to do Big Daddy first.
All right. A little change of pace here since we've been going a little heavy these past few episodes. So
Yeah.
I'm excited. This is a childhood movie for me. I love this movie growing up. It's been a hot minute since I've seen it, so this will be interesting going back to it. But I'm super excited.
Yeah.
All
Don't
right.
forget to follow us on Instagram, all the fun things. Subscribe,
Absolutely.
like us everywhere.
Yep.
And, thank you so much for listening.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.